Hello and welcome to the Sam Pace Memoirs. My name is Sam Pace. Please remember to subscribe, like, and comment below. My first tour was in August of 2012. Sam Pace and the Gilded Grit had been a proper entity for about 8 months, with 6 more months of development and preparation before that. We had put out our first album together, and now we were headed on the road for 12 days, hitting 9 cities with 9 gigs. Memphis, Nashville, Raleigh, New York City, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Chicago, Madison, and Milwaukee. I had planned the whole tour and was headed out with Jake, who was 21, and Patrick, who was 23. I had never done anything like this, and although it was exciting, I was petrified of failure, and a ball of anxiety leading up to all the way through the last gig. If we missed a gig or looked unprofessional in any way, my name would be tarnished. It was my neck on the line, and if I came up short, it would be failure on the front page of my life. And since the boys were 4 and 6 years younger than me, I had to be road manager and dad, in addition to all the other responsibilities I had. We left Austin on a Wednesday morning, headed for Memphis. 6 hours in, our tire blew up in southwest Arkansas. Our first leg of my first tour, and we're sidelined with a blown tire. After a 3-hour delay, including tow and new tire, we were back on the road. We were still good on time, but another issue would be a problem. We managed to get there with a couple hours to spare and got the first one in the bag. The next morning we had an 11 a.m. gig at a famous venue called Tootsie's in Nashville. The ridiculous set time was a consolation gig after they had booked us at a different venue that night at a place that was closed for a private gig. Just days before, I had a frantic call with the not-too-apologetic booker who was responsible for the mix-up. The gig was that special kind of humble pie where the 3 people in the audience included the full band that followed us, a dad and his 2 children. We were opening for a family band before noon. Rock and roll, motherfucker. But hey, anyone observing the tour from afar would be none the wiser. How'd that Nashville gig go? I've been to that place, it's awesome. Great history, you know, Willie Nelson and those guys all used to play there. Yeah, it was great. Move the conversation along, don't mention the set time, and boom, the tour lives on. As we drove from Nashville to Raleigh, we made a stop along I-40 to get gas. Right there in the lot of the station was a road nugget gift-wrapped and bowed. A shirtless Appalachian man in the spot next to us was holding and wrangling a small raccoon. He dangled it, moved it around, and showed it to curious onlookers such as ourselves. Talk about some good tour fodder. We were really out here amongst the crazies of the world. Just rocking and rolling and wrangling raccoons, man. These dudes I was touring with were sweethearts. Jake was freshly 21 and an old soul with a stressful family life that he handled with maturity. He was the kind of guy you take home to mama, but can get down in a street fight if need be. He was a good drummer. Patrick was 23, raised very Christian, and started breaking away from the hindrances of religion pretty quickly after high school. He was book smart, not so much street smart, but good at talking to girls, and since he was still so fresh from his Christian divorce, everything about the tour enchanted him. He had hair like Kenny G, but he was a damn good egg. Jake packed his own food for the trip, which included canned sardines and Cheese Whiz. Patrick drove the car with his knees at times until I told him not to. Jake was younger than Patrick in years, but older in the ways of the world. Patrick was incredibly extroverted and a ham. I was learning the ways of the road with my feet in the fire. One of the biggest issues I was having was moving my bowels with any regularity at all. I was backed up. By the end of the tour, one of the biggest lessons I learned was making sure I took a decent deuce every morning before hitting the road. Make time for it. Hydrate, fiber, the whole 9 yards. We were getting to our gigs one by one, covering lots of miles and not a lot of time, and checking them off the list one by one. Memphis, success. Nashville, check. Raleigh, success. Then came Saturday night in New York City. We had to get from Raleigh, North Carolina on a Friday to Manhattan for a 6 p.m. load-in on a Saturday. We had made it, but we were exhausted when we did. We had been in Austin on Wednesday, played 3 gigs in 3 nights, and traveled halfway across the country. But we were in New York fucking City playing a rock and roll show at a Washington Square venue. What's more was we had some people out that way, and the buzz around our travels meant we would have our biggest crowd yet. Even my grandma Millie came from Paramus, New Jersey with my uncle to catch the set. The sound for the NYC gig was shitty, but we had over 40 people in attendance, and when the show was over, we had our biggest W on the board. And it was only 9 o'clock. After some schmoozing and merch slinging, it was time to enjoy the city. By 9:30, I was in the basement bathroom doing key bumps with an old friend, and the night was on. After hours of enjoying the city, I headed back to the hotel in the band van. The other boys had split up and were enjoying themselves elsewhere. Just a short drive back to the hotel and the success would be etched in the books. But just as I was coming close to the turn I needed to make, a closed-off street ricocheted me onto a bridge to the Bronx. This was a few years before GPS mapping devices were the norm on cell phones, and my Rand McNally U.S. Road Maps book was going to be of little use at 2 a.m. in the Bronx. Keep in mind I also had a number of legal and illegal substances flowing through my body. Although I wasn't wasted and in pretty good shape, it certainly didn't help the matter. I started calling everyone I knew, but no one answered. Everyone was already asleep, and here I was blowing this whole thing to pieces with one wrong turn into the Bronx at 2 in the morning. I kept calling. Nothing. Where the hell was this bridge going? What the fuck am I gonna do? Finally, my dear sweet buddy Josh called me back. Oh, sweet man, I could blow you. Josh had gone to school at NYU, and he had more knowledge of the city than anyone else I knew. He was the kind of guy that could get me home even if I was on the bridge to Terabithia. I was saved. Just as I finally got back to the hotel, who should be returning but good old Jake? He'd had a gay old time himself out there and now returned stumbling through the lobby and up to the room. I needed to handle a luggage issue in the lobby, so he went up before me. By the time I got up to the room, he was hanging over the toilet, honking his guts out. I helped him clean up, picked up the mess, and put him to bed. It was now 4 in the morning and I lay in bed, still buzzing. Overtired and high, I lay there thinking about the past 4 days and 7 left to go before my first tour was in the books. The next 7 days went pretty smoothly. We covered a lot of ground and I was spread pretty thin, but we avoided roadblocks and pitfalls and managed to keep things trucking right along. The last show of our tour was in Chicago, where I lived for 4 years before Austin. Patrick was also from the Chicago area, so the whole night was like a homecoming of sorts. The place was packed and we killed it. A great exclamation point on the tour. The next day we made our way back to Austin. With the tour complete, the pressure of possible failures had evaporated and I felt pretty damn good. Over the last 16 months, I had worked with these youngins week after week to create a sound and identity, and we'd done it. We had just put out an album with 9 original tracks and completed a real national tour where we actually made money. We were heading back to Austin and already had a bunch of great opportunities lined up. Now we could start making a name for ourselves and sniff out some real money gigs. I was also heading back to my future wife in Austin, who I just started dating 3 months before, and I was coming home with stripes. We got back and pulled up to Patrick's house to unload equipment and drop off the boys. After everything was unloaded, Jake said he had something to tell us. He was leaving the band. He had school starting in a week as well as a new job and was planning on moving further away than he was already. The prospect of cranking things up and working more with the band being an even bigger commitment was too much right now. He was sorry. I wasn't totally surprised. Over the last month or so, he had developed more of an attitude, less of a willingness to be led, and I could tell he was burning the candle at both ends. I wasn't that upset when he told us, but that night, lying in bed, exhausted from the adventure, I got surprisingly emotional. We had been through a lot over the last year and a half, and the last week and a half was as strong a bonding experience as I had had with almost anybody. He was a good kid. Now my ship had a hole in it. All my hard work and the opportunities in front of us were in jeopardy. I slept for 14 hours that night. When I woke up, my 24-hour sense of accomplishment and excitement had vanished. I no longer had a band. This concludes episode 3 of season 1. I hope that you enjoyed it. Please remember to subscribe, like, and comment below, and we'll see you next week.